The Space Shuttle Discovery is the one object in the National Air and Space Museum's collection that never fails to choke me up. Every inch of it tells an incredible story, from the scuffs on its thermal tiles to the lettering on its side. It is an astounding object to witness in person. But what was it like to fly one? My friend, retired astronaut Colonel Katie Coleman, joins me in admiring this amazing piece of space history and tells us just what it was like to fly in one on not one, but 2 missions to space.
Katie, I have to tell you, every time I come to this museum and look at this thing in person, I get choked up. And there's a whole bunch of reasons, but I'm wondering if you have an emotional response to seeing a shuttle up close and in person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think that after a little while, and candidly, you know, for these few weeks here, I have actually gotten to see 2 space shuttles. And so you'd think I'd be like, oh yeah, I've seen it, right?
Yeah.
I've seen it again. I'm glad I have the memory. But you know what? It's astonishing to see it in person. It's like a religious experience. And I think it just means everything hopeful inside of us. That, you know, that people could actually, I mean, it's part of us to leave this planet and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's all our place. But we need something to go in.
And it is such a character. Are you standing here looking at this big trapezoidal nose? It almost looks like a dog's snout, like it's like Snoopy. But I'm looking at, I see all the tiles and all the marks and all the marks of its utility and its construction. It feels like it's like humans built this.
Well, it's a puzzle. You know,
Right,
if it was
right,
like one
yes.
piece and just skin and just all beautiful like in the movies, it's so clear that this was not easy.
Right.
And that real people made it happen, being able to bring people up to space and come back home.
Now, you were telling me earlier that when you were flying on the shuttle, you went on two missions.
I did.
That didn't involve seeing the shuttle a lot.
Right.
Because you were inside of it. I never thought about that, but that makes total sense now that you say it.
Well, and you can look out, but I have to say that when I would look out the window, like for the very first time, you look and you see that, you know, the edge of the planet, and I mean, it's just so clear that you are in a spaceship and you are orbiting the Earth. And I didn't actually really see the shuttle, if that makes sense, because the Earth is everything.
Okay, so you've just gone through the exiting Earth's gravity well. You were able to unclip, but you're in the middeck. You're not up where the windows are.
Depends on the mission.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So I was actually on the flight deck for my first mission.
So that must have been stunning to watch all that come to fruition. When it's in the second one, when you're on the middeck, is there a moment when they say, come on upstairs and check out the view?
Well, we had like special circumstances, right? Because we had our electrical short just after liftoff, and we're deploying the Chandra telescope, 7 hours, 17 minutes, 17 seconds after launch. I was in charge of the deploy. And so I remember actually just like, popping my head up and going, Eileen, are we deploying today or not? Just need to know.
Because there had been so many complications already.
Right, and especially, having our fuel problem, that we were in a different orbit than we expected, and would we be able to launch the telescope into the place that it needed to be to do its job, which is like a third of the way to the moon.
So humans are really great at anticipating and thinking about the future and prognosticating different ways it might come to fruition. But still, that first time you look out the windows and you realize that you're in space, there must be some aspect that you just didn't fathom.
I used to ask people like what it would be like, and people would talk, other astronauts, and they would talk about what it was like. And so I knew I was going to go. I knew we'd be floating. I knew it would be amazing. And then you realize that they always had a look in their eyes like they knew a secret. And it just is. It's even though you know everything about it, it's not the same as actually being there and being a part of it and realizing that. I mean, you think you've left home, but home is actually just bigger than you thought, further than you thought.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Can we go look at some? I want to talk about some details over here. Katie, so this is the door. The
Well,
hatch.
okay, so I think it's the door. We actually never get to see the door.
You never see
when you think
this?
about it, it's, the shuttle's up on the launch pad, right? And the gangway is there in the white room that we call it.
Right.
I mean, it's really like a gangplank, and if the shuttle's not there, it's like a cliff.
Right,
down
hundreds
there.
of feet down.
And when we get there, the hatch is actually down. And we're crawling over the hatch to then climb into the space shuttle.
So you barely ever see the outside of
Exactly.
the hatch except in pictures.
Exactly.
Plus, you enter the shuttle in a vertical orientation and you exit it in a
No,
horizontal.
right.
That's got to be its own brand of strange.
I think in horizontal, it's not so. I mean, it's sort of normal. Airplane, walk out, or kind of walk out. We're sort of like not very steady.
Yeah.
But it's climbing in, and we actually practice that because it's so foreign, really, to like walk in. You walk in, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be here, and everything. Nothing really makes any sense, right?
Yeah.
And so we practice in a simulator to see, to make sure that we really don't get discombobulated and step on the wrong thing.
Right. Now, I'm curious about re-entry. Once this is back in Earth's gravity well, it's got to be hard on your system. Tell me about what it's like to come back to Earth.
I just remember thinking, we had a 16-day mission, like the longest mission at that time,
Wow.
right? And I just remember thinking, why? Why are we coming home? We have so much work to do up there. I mean, we were the mission that was basically pioneering the laboratory, of what kind of experiments we're going to do up there. And I was like, I don't want to come home yet. I mean, it just seemed like a place that we have a lot of work to do. And there's really no sense leaving unless you really have to.
So you were disappointed to come home.
I was, actually, totally. And on the second mission, it was a 5-day mission because the Chandra telescope was the largest and the heaviest thing we ever brought to space. We had 5 crew members in a 5-day flight, and we had barely gotten our spacesuits off when we were putting them back on and, coming home. So that felt, but you can't really whine that you've only been in space like 5 days, right? So I want to take back the whining part of it, okay?
I just imagine that if I was weightless for a few days and I came back onto Earth, that I know my stomach, I feel like I would be throwing up constantly.
And you might.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's actually, but we've been up there and just the touch of a finger, or even, I did this up in space where you can take like one hair from your head, stretch it between your fingers and use it to push off of something. And you just do that and you're just like pushing like this, and you will then push yourself backwards, right?
So all your physical responses to things have changed.
You're so finely tuned that when you come back and now you are walking and and everything is just so confused. And in fact, when we get up to space, I would say, different people are sick. I can only comment on myself.
Yeah.
And on my first flight, we had so many delays. I think we were all very well hydrated and we were really well rested because we had all these delays. My family has not forgiven me for the delays.
For all the delays.
But I think because of that, we had 5 rookies, 2 experienced people, and not a single person even burped on that flight. But it's actually more common that about 3/4 of the people get sick.
I would imagine.
Yep.
I look at it up close here and I see every single tile, slightly different color. They've all been replaced on different schedules. But I look at the blankets on the side, the white part, and I just think I would never have imagined a spaceship that would have such a covering. But this is really what a real spaceship is.
And people think, I have to say, I was surprised. I thought it was like the side of an airplane and smooth. But they're really just thinking, how cold or hot do we need to keep everything there, the hinges, the doors, the instruments. And so it's all about what's behind there and how much protection does it need. And the blankets are really, they can be different thicknesses, right?
Right. The thermal management is
Exactly.
such a huge issue.
Yep. Every time I probably cry almost every time I see a launch. And it's just that it's so beautiful and amazing. And it just becomes clear in that very moment that it just might not go right.
Right.
And I just sit there just going, and that it's built, and that everybody cares and everybody's done their best. You really know that. But it is a really hard thing to go to space. And so the fact that we get there and back successfully is because people do the right thing.
Katie, I love that we're standing underneath this. This is the body flap?
The body flap.
The body
Yep.
flap. All right. I thought it was an aileron, but it moves like as part of the flight control.
Exactly, for coming in.
And it doesn't look like any part of any airplane I've ever seen. It looks more like someone's deck, like a piece of architecture cantilevered over us.
Yeah, and you don't want to be like falling off the deck, right?
No.
But when we start coming in, I mean, there's not very much air. There's not many air molecules to push on.
Yeah.
And that's why we need actually such big control surfaces to be able to really maneuver. It's 200,000 pounds or so.
200,000 pounds. And you have a glide ratio that's like 1, right?
Yes, well, like 1 to 7, you know. So it's really, really steep, right?
Yeah. And it is. Sorry, I'm like almost speechless staring at this. These engines, I remember building this model when I was like 12 years old, and then again when I was 16, then again a couple years ago. And I've held these engines in my hand, right? They're this big. And what amazes me is there's no more detail on these than there was on the model. They're quite simple and straightforward.
I mean, rocket engines they have certain principles, and you know, what's amazing to me is the fact that they're these like, you know, corrugated, it looks like cardboard, but it's actually a series of tubes running up and down and up and down and up and down. And what's happening there is the cold fuel from that big orange tank, freezing, right, is coming in, getting warmed up in this hot engine bell, because the fire's coming out of the engine bell.
So it's running through all around the engine bell.
And then going into the engine. And it warms up the fuel so that there's not a sort of shock of cold fuel going into the engine.
Jeez, whoa.
Well, and actually, I look up here, and it's a sobering place for me to look up. I don't know if you know, on STS-93, we actually had a leak in one of our main engines where the oxygen comes out, there's some gold pins that are pinned in there, and one of those gold pins shot out and actually knocked a hole in one of those sort of cardboard, the little
on the inside of the bell.
Exactly. And so hydrogen is coming out, and it changes the ratio of fuel, and we actually had what we call a low-level cut, meaning we didn't get all the way to orbit before we stopped the engines because they ran out of fuel.
That tiny little gold pin made a notch big enough to change your fuel ratio that you had to stop the engines before you reached your orbit.
Exactly. And it's not really our orbit, it's the orbit of the Chandra X-ray Observatory.
Right.
I mean, we're up there, we're going to send it off with its rocket on its butt it eventually will be in an orbit a third of the way to the moon. It's got like a 55-hour orbit. So it really needed a special place in the sky. And so as soon as we got up there and engines are shut down and we're getting everything straight, I'm like, Eileen, are we launching the telescope today or not? I just need to know.
Because if you're not in the orbit you need to be, you can't just paddle over to the orbit you need.
We can actually change our orbit.
Oh,
And
okay.
I mean, these engines are done. Once we've finished ascent and we've gotten rid of the fuel tank, they're done.
Yeah.
But the two up above them, that are kind of medium-sized,
Yeah.
those are big enough that we really can and do actually change our orbit to make it the shape that we want it to be.
Oh, fascinating. And you were, I'm assuming, in a reasonable enough orbit. You got to a reasonable enough orbit.
Exactly. Far enough away and going the right speed to be able to put the telescope into its orbit. And that was in 1999. That telescope is supposed to last for 5 years. It brings us literally everything we know about black holes. Chandra, exactly. Still. And it's now 21 years later. It is still doing amazing things in astrophysics.
NASA absolutely has the best warranty program of anybody out there making stuff. I'm thinking of the rovers on Mars outliving their lifespan by a decade.
Well, but these things are hard because you try to guarantee all the parts, and who knows? We do know. I mean, it's all engineering and it's all math, and at the same time, you don't want to be wrong. And so, I won't say that things are over-engineered, but I will say that going to space is hard.
Okay, so I want to know, when you're up there, did you make any phone calls? Did you call anyone from space?
On the shuttle, we get to make like 2 phone calls, right? On the space station.
So one's to your lawyer.
No. But on the space station, it's actually a magical thing where I always thought if you're going to go for a long time, I don't know, do you ever need to vent after your day? I mean,
yeah.
I might need to do that sometimes. And the fact that we have an internet protocol phone, it's as private as any cell phone call is, which is not, right?
Wow.
But it's private enough for me.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can call people and, and have sort of family that are kind of up there with you, my husband, my son, we talked almost every day. I'd call on the phone, so to speak, and I would read stories to my son Jamie, who was 10 at the time.
That's so beautiful.
It's just, you learn different ways of sort of staying in touch and being in video conferences once a week. And so Sundays at our house in Shelburne Falls would be the day that neighbors and friends would come over, because we would have a video conference, and I would take this laptop and fly them around the space station.
Oh.
And none of that would have happened without the space shuttle, because we built that space station with this space shuttle.
Your stories, we talk about the space shuttle as human ingenuity, human engineering, human expansion off of our planet. And the word human is used all the time, but the word that I think of listening to your stories is people.
Yeah.
And that's different than human. And it's people built this, and people went up in it, and people solved all of the myriad, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of tiny problems to get it up. It's so inspiring.
And when I walk into a museum and I see the space shuttle, I mean, in my mind, it's covered with people. People all doing their part of what it took to launch.
Katie, thank you so much. It's so inspiring.
It's so fun.
Would you go up again?
Oh, in a minute.
Okay, good.
Yes, any vehicle. You could pick anyone here.
Okay.
I would go, okay?
100%.